I want a referendum, really. And the people have a right to a referendum. It's the most basic right of a people when they wish to go and decide on their own. A parliament, a Knesset, is the representative of the people. But sovereignty lies in the people. It's the concept of principal and agent. The principal is the people. The agent is the Knesset. The agent's job is to do what the principal wants. But if the principal wants to dismiss the agent, it can do so and say, on this issue, I want to do it myself. And there are numerous cases when on basic issues, referendum was the answer in many countries. When Great Britain was thinking of joining the EEC, and it was a tremendous issue, a tremendous battle, yes, no, it was not Parliament that voted on it, it was a referendum. The same thing happened in France, and in Norway, and in Denmark. Chile has just had two of them. In Switzerland, major issues are regularly decided by referenda. We want a referendum because the country is being torn apart. Once and for all, let's settle this already. I'm sick and tired of this two-headed, headless government. It's out of hell. Shimon Peres comes to New York, and on the same day, so does Moshe Erez. One checks into this hotel, that one checks to that hotel. One calls a press conference for 10 a.m., calls for noon. At his conference, he says yes, he says no. And not only is it ludicrous, it's a tragedy. We have to decide, we have to make decisions to give up land or not to give up land, ever. To annex the land or not. To move the Arabs out or not. Let's decide on a referendum and let the people vote on it. And that's what we're pushing, and that's what we're pulling, and that's what we're demanding. And we'll get it, and we'll get it. If they thought that they could bar me, they don't know me. One final word to you people who are living here in the States. I want you to know the Jew in this country has no idea how hated he is in America. How much Jew hate, not anti-Semitism is a tepid kind of a thing, an antiseptic kind of a concept, a Madison Avenue term. Jew hatred, if you realized how much they hate Jews here. You think it couldn't happen here? What's wrong with us? It could happen here. Very, very easily. Don't clap about it, really. It's not. It is nothing to clap about. It's something to weep about. And it's something to weep about because when you go back and you go to your rabbi and say, Kahane said that it could happen, you'll say, Kahane is paranoid. Well, first of all, I want you to know that paranoid Jews live longer. That's the first thing. I'm not paranoid, but I know that in Germany, the German Jews were more convinced that it could never happen there than Jews are in this country. The Jews of Germany lived better than you live in the sense that they were Germans. They were Germans. They didn't even call themselves Jewish. They called themselves Germans of the Mosaic faith. They were convinced that they were Germans, and they truly loved Germans. It could never happen there. When I hear the Germans are terrible, the worst of the anti-Semites weren't Germans. They were scores of other countries worse than that. The Poles were worse, the Lithuanians, the Ukrainians, the Slovaks, the Hungarians, of course they were worse. Germany had a Jewish foreign minister in 1922. Walter Rathenau, Jewish foreign minister. America didn't have a Secretary of State Jewish until 1972. Now, it was only because he fled Germany. The Jews were convinced it could never happen there. And it did happen there, not because Germans have horns and tails. Germans don't have horns and don't have tails. That's the tragedy. If they had horns and tails, I'd feel better. That's different. But they don't have horns and tails. What happened was that there was a terrible economic collapse. And they lost their savings and they lost hope. And when someone loses hope, he'll do anything to get it back. And that's what Hitler did. He gave them hope again. And the Jews were the price. And they did it knowing that the people of Bach and Beethoven and Goethe and Fichte and Hegel went and said, all right, do it. Do it. It couldn't happen here. Are we insane? Our problem is that the average Jew doesn't really know Gentile. He may work with Gentiles, but he doesn't know them. There's a dinner at the National Conference of Christians and Jews. The black-tie Jews come, the black-tie Christians come, sit and exchange jokes, talk, plaques. This, your plaque, my plaque, 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 plaque. You think that at a dinner you're going to find out what people really think about Jews? There's only one place to find out what people think about Jews really, and that is in a bar. A neighborhood bar, a working class bar, not a trendy bar, a bar. You walk in there and sit quietly and listen as the schnapps goes in what comes out. The jealousy, the envy, the Jews own this and the Jews run this and the Jews, and that's when times are good. God forbid should there be an economic collapse in this country. God forbid. A people that is hooked on what was once a luxury and which today are needs will not easily give it up. And they'll blame the Jews and not the blacks, because the anti-Semite blames Jews for everything, including blacks. That's the tragedy. So we sit and we ignore it, and I don't want to see it, and I don't want to think about it, and it will go away. Nothing goes away. It becomes worse. You have to deal with it. And the answer is, look, I founded JDL, but I never deceived myself into ever thinking that JDL could ever save Jews if, God forbid, the government went, the economy went. JDL was necessary and is still necessary to deal with neighborhood thugs and hoodlums, and so of course it's necessary, of course, but it can't save Jews if, God forbid, the whole country goes. And the answer is Aliyah. We waited 1900 years for a state, and we prayed, and we 3 times a day, may our eyes behold our return to Zion. And now there's a Zion, and we sit in Brookline. What's wrong with us? What's wrong with us? Go home, and especially the young people, especially the young people. This summer, take off from school. Go to Israel. Find a school there. Yeshiva, better. If you like it, stay. If you don't like it, leave the yeshiva, but stay in Israel. Get married. Get married. Have 1 million babies. Every Jewish child is a gem, a gem, a gem. We owe Hitler 2 million babies. Pay him with interest. And get a job. Work with your hands. Who says that every Jew a college degree? Unbelievable. Every Jew a PhD. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a lawyer or marry one. No matter what your parents say. You don't have to. Learn to work with your hands. Be a Jewish farmer in the territories, which by the time you get there, we'll make sure will not be the territories, but part of Israel. And plant a tree. You know what a Jewish tree is? And believe me, no one is going to burn them down when we're in power. Burn a tree. Take a tree and live there and live on the settlement. And someday, when you're older and you're sitting with your grandchildren in a settlement now become a town, and you tell them how it was then, it was difficult, and you tell the whole story, and your grandchildren look up at you and say, Ezer Saba, what a grandfather, Ezer Safta, what a grandmother, then you know what Jewish nachas is. Then you know what Jewish nachas is. When I went on Aliyah, I took my youngest son, who was at that time 4, to Hebron at night. It was a tremendous night. It was a beautiful night. The stars, the whole sky was ablaze with stars. And he had just learned that day in yeshiva the story of Abraham in Hebron, who went out and God said, "Can you count the stars? And so shall be your seed." And I said to him, "Benny, you see, that's the way it was that night, and maybe you're standing right where Avram stood." And he looked down at his feet, because you can't do that in Brookline. That's what being Jewish is. Let me tell you what hell is and what heaven is in Judaism. I don't know, but let me tell you what I think. I think it means reaching the age of 70 or 80 and looking back upon your life. And if you look back and say, "Oh, what did I do? What a waste." That's hell. If you look back and say, "It was hard, oh, it was hard, but it was great," that's heaven. Don't ever, ever go to Jewish hell. Climb the mountain. Life is not easy. But only cheap things come cheaply. Great things cost. But they're great. And I want to finish with a Dvar Torah that I always finish with, because it's such a great one. It isn't mine. The rabbis in the Talmud say that when God wanted to give the Torah to the Jewish people, all the mountains came rushing, all the high, the lofty, the mighty mountains, and each one said, "I want the Torah on my peak. I want the opportunity. I want it on my peak." And God said, "No, I have a small mountain. It's called Sinai. And I'm going to give it on Sinai to teach the Jew to be humble." Now that's the end of the story, and it's a nice story. It goes over well with the B'nai B'rith. Humble. But the Ger Rebbe, who was he was a great scholar and also smart, asked an obvious question, and an obvious question that anyone here, I'm sure many of you have already seen the obvious question here. He said, if God wanted to teach the Jew to be humble, why didn't he give the Torah in a valley? See, that's what makes rabbis great. There's nothing more humble than a valley. That's about the lowest you can possibly get. And he said, because God wanted to teach the Jews 2 lessons. 1, be humble. 2, don't be too humble. Jews are not valleys. Nobody steps on us. We are mountains. Not arrogant mountains, but we are mountains. So no guilt, pride, and no weakness, power. The greatness of Judaism is the soul, that's for sure. But without a body, there's no soul. And all the great spirits of Eastern Europe, all the great soul is gone because the only bodies there are dead ones. And don't worry about what the world will